Okay, I'm here on the roof of the CSI with Darren O'Donnell from the Mammalian Diving Reflex. So, great name. Where did that come from?
It was a long time ago. It was. It actually came. Used to be this right-wing magazine in Alberta called the Alberta Report. Right. And one time I was hanging around this youth employment office, flipping through it, and there was an article about the Mammalian Diving Reflex, and I thought it was an interesting phrase, and so I wrote a play about it, and then ended up using it for the name of the company. And it's a metaphor for just sort of surviving during difficult times. The diving reflex is something that kicks into place when you're submerged quickly into cold water or a cold environment. Your metabolism gets slowed right down so that you can manage to survive off whatever oxygen you have in your body at that point.
Right. So let's stick with the medical. One of the things that the way you've described what you do is social acupuncture. Can you sort of frame what the Mammalian Diving Reflex does in that context?
Sure. Social acupuncture is just sort of a loose kind of term that we use for a bunch of activities that we have in the company that focus on bringing people together in kind of atypical configurations and identifying areas where there might be some deficiency or excess, and that's usually around economic, or it's taking a look at class or race, and just taking a look at the differences and sort of tensions between in situations and trying to induce kind of new ways of being together that in small ways and just in mostly in just performance ways create new dynamics. For example, we did a whole dinner series called Eat the Street, and we had kids from Parkdale Public School coming to restaurants that were all along Queen Street West, and in that area we have all of these restaurants and businesses that are coming sort of down the street, down toward into Parkdale, and that area is being gentrified, and it's changing quite quickly. And then on the other hand, you have all these kids living in mostly apartment buildings along Jameson or at West Lodge, and they themselves are mostly often immigrants. If not they themselves, then their parents are immigrants, and so we have these two populations that don't spend much time together but are in the same space at the same time and don't know much about each other. So we wanted to sort of bring them together and sort of induce this encounter across these class and racial divides, just basically to see what happens and to see if other kind of ways of being together can kind of flow out of that.
Well, it sounds like the two things that are coming together there too are art and social work, right? I mean, there's a good social work piece there. That's intentional, obviously, right?
Yeah, we kind of talk about that. The sort of way we think about that is we have this phrase called greasing the glue, where where art is at this point is sort of being used in two kind of different ways. One is to grease the economic wheels through large-scale art events like Luminato, where we have the city as a tourist destination. So that's one way art is being utilized, and the other way is by gluing the social fabric through sort of more sort of community arts and social-based stuff. So we're trying to kind of conflate those two imperatives and bring them together so that they kind of contaminate each other, and we bring the community into the realm of the spectacle and the spectacle to the level of the community. So we try to make both of them happen at the same time. So we have sort of spectacular community events.
Right. So it's sort of performance art with the audience really heavily involved and the community really heavily involved.
Yeah, very heavily involved.
Right. So you also refer to yourself as a research/art atelier. How does that work? What do you mean by that?
Well, we're just trying to look at these social dynamics and sort of see what happens when we press a few buttons and bring a few people together, and what happens. Can we bring community together? Can we actually manifest community? We've done some work and had some of our stuff studied by some urban planners at the University of Toronto, and they studied us for a report that some of the graduate students did. And the question there, and it's unresolved, is whether or not this kind of work actually makes a difference, or is it just a momentary bit of fun? Or do we, when we bring together artsters and these kids and these businesses, do people meet people, and do we have subsequent relationships, or do we change, our attitudes changed about each other, or changed about the community? And it's hard to say, but we're looking into that and we're curious about that, and we think of the company as a kind of studio or atelier for this kind of research. And
an atelier working with other organizations to bring that about, right?
Yeah, we work a lot with Parkdale Public School. We're the resident company there. We're often partnering with theater festivals, international theater festivals in other places. The Push Festival in Vancouver. We're working with the London International Festival of Theatre in London, Sydney Festival in Australia, Melbourne Festival. So we partner with big organizations and often do interventions into those organizations and the way they function and bring them together with a local community. And it's sort of one of the advantages of when you're outside of a community, you can come in and kind of have a fresh eye and then, you know, bring people together that might not ordinarily be together or might not have noticed each other because of their close proximity. You kind of have this different eye, and so we try to make that happen.
One of your most famous pieces is the bringing together of haircuts and children. So tell me, describe that, because it'll give people a good sense of what it is that you guys do.
Right. Haircuts by Children is a project that we started in 2006, and we started that here. And it's very simple. We spend some time with the kids, spend a day doing workshops on performance art and relational aesthetics and social practice art and kind of why all this kind of stuff is considered art. And then we do a day talking about, or a workshop talking about children's rights, and particularly what children are not allowed to do because they're children, and we question that and we get debates happening. And then we spend a few days getting the kids trained by a professional stylist, and the kids are trained as hairstylists, and then we rent a salon and pay the kids to work in a salon, and they spend, usually it's a weekend, they spend 4 hours on each day just working in a salon and cutting people's hair, and we have a really good time. And there's a interesting thing that happens. It was kind of an unanticipated off the top. Was a really interesting social dynamic occurs, and this strange intimacy occurs between a child and an adult who don't know each other, and children and adults not knowing each other getting together and in close proximity and talking quietly about, you know, whatever small things they might be interested in is just something that's not, you know, there's no place for that to happen in our society with so much sort of stranger danger. And so we try to make situations where people encounter each other in kind of new and fresh ways.
Now, it really strikes me that in some ways what you're doing is almost sort of anti-web, in the sense that the web is about bringing together communities of disparate people from different places in different times, in asynchronous, you know, discussion groups and stuff. And you guys are really about creating community in the moment, right?
Yeah, absolutely. But we use the web to do that. I mean, the web's a great thing. It's a great tool, and we use it as much as, you know, as much as we can. And we also do this stuff. I mean, what we're more anti would be a kind of sort of theater experience, because we are constituted as a theater company. That's how we sort of started. We're more sort of anti the kind of situation where there's an audience, you know, on one side not really doing anything, and then the performers on stage doing something, and the audience watches them. And there's nothing wrong with that kind of experience. It's just that I don't personally find that very exhilarating. So I like participatory stuff. I like the messiness of it. I like the things that come up that nobody's anticipated and stuff like that.
Right. So what do you work with children now? The next step, you're working with older folks. Tell me a bit about that project.
Yeah, we're working on a project. At this point, the working title is The Best Sex I've Ever Had, and we're wanting to talk to, at this point we're just in the research stage, and we're talking to people who are 65 and older about the state of their sexuality now at 65 and older, and then the course of their sexuality, how it evolved over their lifetime, and then what is optimal sex, what was the best sex they ever had, and trying to look at kind of those 3 angles and talk to these people, and eventually get some people up on stage, and that will be more of a stage show, but there'll be participatory elements where there'll be Q&As and ways for you to work and talk with the elderly people. What
change do you think your work makes?
That's a hard question to answer. I don't know, and I'm not even willing to even take a shot at that. I mean, it might be something that is understood long after I'm dead, or maybe never understood. It's really hard to say. It's really hard to quantify. All I know is we have a good time when we're doing it, and that much I can rely on. And people claim that they're you know, they have some small shifts in consciousness and small revelations of some sort, or big revelations even sometimes. But to what extent that those things last and affect consciousness, and those things will in turn affect how people act, I can't answer that question.
Okay. Hey, thanks for joining us.
All right, thanks.